Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to share and subscribe the channel. The horned beast woman says her species only mates once, and she's already chosen me. Welcome to the world of science fiction. Comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. John Barrett never meant to crash. He was a cargo pilot, not a soldier, not a thrill-seeker. He liked his routes quiet and uneventful, flying supplies across the outer sectors of Eric's space. But that morning, the storm had rolled over the cliffs without warning, a surge of black wind and lightning that split the clouds like a blade. His shuttle, barely held together by overused shielding and outdated nav software, lost its grip on the flight path within seconds. Alarms howled. His hands moved by instinct across controls, trying to stabilize the descent. Nothing worked. The last thing he remembered before everything went black was the looming outline of a stone terrace, jagged, unnatural, rising from the clouds like teeth. He woke up warm, surprisingly. For a moment he thought he'd died and someone had dragged him to a fire. But no, his shoulder ached, ribs burned, and there was a distant hum, crackling embers maybe, but deeper than any earth fire. His eyes adjusted slowly to the dim room, and he saw curved stone walls lined with veins of glowing blue fungus. Strange carvings spiraled over the ceilings. The scent in the air was earthy, clean and sharp, like rain over iron and crushed pine needles. Then he saw her. She sat in a crouch beside him, inspecting a shallow wound on his leg. Not a human. Her fur was slate gray and thick, her hands clawed but gentle, her eyes glowing yellow like embers. They met his. Two black horns curled back from her temples like polished obsidian. Her long braided hair hung over one shoulder, a ribbon of black and silver strands. She didn't speak at first, just studied him with a quiet intensity that unsettled him more than pain ever could. When he tried to move, her hand stopped him with a firm press to the chest. "You're safe," she said, her voice deep but steady. "I carried you from the wreckage. You're in my den now." "Thanks," he managed, surprised at how dry his throat felt. "Name's John." "Paisley," she answered, then tilted her head, nostrils flaring slightly. "Your scent is stronger awake. That makes sense." He blinked. "Sorry." "You're my mate now," she said as plainly as someone might announce the weather. "I chose you." There was a long pause as his brain processed those words. "Hold on, what mate? I think we've got a misunderstanding here. I'm human, we don't do scent stuff." Paisley sat back on her heels, perfectly calm. "My kind mates once, we bond by scent. I caught yours when I pulled you from the fire wreck. It settled in my chest like a brand. I can't unchoose you, I wouldn't want to." John tried to sit up again, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "That's a lot. I appreciate the rescue, I do, but I didn't agree to anything." "You didn't need to." She stood then, tall and imposing, casting a silhouette against the bioluminescent walls. "Choice isn't how my people bond, it's instinct. You're not in danger, John Barrett, you're valued." He didn't know what to say to that. Her voice wasn't aggressive, just certain, like this was a natural fact he'd have to catch up with eventually. She stepped outside the room, and he heard the faint creak of rope bridges swaying in wind. The fog beyond the stone walls shifted like living smoke. Through a gap in the rock wall, he saw a glimpse of a distant fire pit and shapes moving near it, other beast folk, tall and furred, their horns casting long shadows. He lay back, head spinning. Whatever this place was, it wasn't in any database he'd ever flown through. The shuttle's nav logs were probably gone, his comms gear toast, and now a woman, beast woman, had just declared him her life mate with the same gravity someone might use to announce dinner. Later, she returned with a wooden bowl of hot broth, the smell rich and unfamiliar. "You should eat," she said, setting it beside him. "Your wounds need strength." He looked up at her, trying to gauge the situation. "Paisley, right? Look, back where I'm from, relationships take time. People talk, learn about each other, grow close. It's not just a scent." "I understand," she said, folding her arms across her chest. "But my people have no time for layers. Once we scent bond, we build a den, a life, a future. That's how it's always been." He sat in silence for a moment before muttering, "I was supposed to be delivering thermal cores to Outpost Delta, not being adopted by a mountain goddess." Her ears twitched slightly at that. "You believe I'm divine." "I think I'm concussed," he said, taking a cautious sip of the broth. It was smoky with a metallic aftertaste, but good. "What happens now?" "We build," she said simply. "I've already begun clearing space beside my den for yours, but if you prefer, you may stay inside. I will not press contact until you allow it." Something about her seriousness made him pause. This wasn't just instinct, it was culture, foundation, maybe even law. She wasn't joking or playing some fantasy game. This was real to her. She was offering him a place in her life, in her world, even if she didn't fully understand his. And for now, she was giving him room. "Okay," he said, watching her glowing eyes as she stood again. "Let's just slow this down a little." She nodded, her expression unreadable but not unfriendly. "Slower than scent is strange, but I will try." As she turned to leave again, John looked down at the strange carvings around the room and wondered what kind of world he just crash-landed into. Not one he could walk away from, that was for sure. And deep down, a part of him, when he didn't want to admit existed, wasn't entirely sure he wanted to. John woke the next morning to the sound of wind moaning through the cliffside walkways and the soft creaking of ropes from the bridges outside. The fog hadn't lifted. It was still thick, swirling between the mountain terraces like it had a mind of its own. He sat up with a grunt, the ache in his ribs dull but ever-present, and noticed someone had laid out fresh clothes for him. Not his. These were handmade from tough, flexible fabric, likely woven from local fibers, dark gray and surprisingly warm. He changed into them slowly, nodding the fit wasn't bad, and stepped to the stone archway that opened out into the village beyond. Outside, the full scope of Paisley's world revealed itself more clearly. The village clung to the cliffside like moss, with stone-carved dens set into the mountains and connected by rope and wood bridges that swayed over nothing but endless mist far below. He could hear water, some kind of river or waterfall, but it was hidden from view by the dense fog. Fire pits burned in open alcoves, illuminating the cliff paths in a reddish glow. Dozens of beast folk moved through the mist, some pausing to glance at him, others ignoring him entirely. Horns, fur, long braids, they all resembled Paisley in silhouette but varied in build, color, and size. A society living out here in the clouds, untouched by the off-world mining routes and satellite scans. How the hell had this place stayed hidden? Paisley appeared at his side before he even heard her approach. She moved silently, barefoot on the stone, wearing armor this time, leather and bones fitted to her body and decorated with what looked like carved stones and teeth. "You're healing well," she said, simply eyeing his posture. "Thanks to you," John said, rubbing his shoulder. "I didn't get a chance to say that properly before." "You did," she replied, leading him across one of the bridges. "But words are hollow without actions. Come, you should see the village with both eyes open." He followed her, gripping the rope rail instinctively. The bridge swayed, but Paisley didn't flinch. She walked with total confidence, like the wind was part of her balance. The further they went, the more he noticed signs of structure, markets, training spaces, even a garden area built into the stone wall, glowing with small fungal lights. Beast folk worked with tools, trained in pairs, cooked over open flame, bartered carved trinkets and metal scraps that must have come from off-world wrecks. This wasn't a tribe. It was a civilization, rough and wild, but clearly established. At a larger open space near the mountain's spine, Paisley gestured for him to sit on a stone bench beside a wide fire. A small group of beast folk had gathered there, warriors by the look of them. She introduced them in her language, then turned to him. "They are clan sentinels. They saw your crash from the upper ridge and helped retrieve the salvage. They are curious." One of the sentinels, a massive figure with white-streaked fur and spiral horns, grunted and said something sharp. Paisley translated, "He says you're weak-blooded, that you'll bring trouble." John met the elder's gaze without blinking. "I didn't ask to be here, but I'm not leaving until I understand what's going on. If there's danger, it's not from me." The sentinel responded again, snorting, and turned away. Another, younger one, leaned in to speak to Paisley, voice low and wary. "What's he saying?" John asked. Paisley hesitated, then replied, "He says your presence changes things, that I should have waited before choosing a mate, that the bond might curse the cliff line." John stiffened. "You're not regretting it, are you?" She looked at him then, head slightly tilted. "No, my instincts do not lie, you're mine. I've known that since the moment I smelled the smoke in your hair, but others fear what they do not understand." He didn't know how to respond to that. Something in the way she said mine felt less possessive and more protective, as though she was making a vow not just to him, but to whatever bond her kind believed in. Still, it weighed on him. This wasn't some casual romance. This was serious, permanent. They moved on from the meeting, heading deeper into the village. At one point, a child barely waist-high, all wiry limbs and oversized horns, ran up to them and pointed excitedly at John. Paisley crouched to speak to the child in their language, then looked up at John, amused. She thinks your eyes are funny. She's never seen blue before. John knelt as well, offering a smile and a handshake, which confused the kid but earned a delighted laugh. Nice to meet you too. As they continued walking, John finally said, You said your people mate once. What happens if it doesn't work out? Paisley didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was flat. It always works out. The scent tells us what the mind does not. There are no mistakes. He wanted to challenge that, ask what happened to the unhappy ones, the ones who changed over time. But the way she said it made him think she wouldn't see the point in the question. To her, this wasn't some gamble. It was truth. By the time they returned to her den, the sun was beginning to set, casting orange through the mist and giving the entire cliffside an eerie glow. She invited him inside, where a fresh meal was waiting, more broth, this time with something resembling roasted meat and tubers. He sat across from her on woven cushions and looked her in the eyes. Paisley, I need you to understand something. Where I come from, love, mating is a choice. A slow one. People decide, they try things, and sometimes they change their minds. You're asking me to accept something permanent, and I've only known you for 2 days. She met his gaze without flinching. I'm not asking, I'm offering. You can stay here and learn, or you can leave if your body allows it, but I won't chase or force. My heart is already yours. What you do with it is your choice. That was the first time he heard her say the word choice. And even though she said it quietly, it echoed louder than anything else she had spoken. I'll stay, he said finally, but I need time to understand you, not just your customs, you. She nodded, rising to stoke the fire. Time is yours, just don't take too long. I have already started carving your name into the bonding stone. When he gave her a surprised look, she added without sarcasm, Don't worry, I left space in case you decide to reject it. John leaned back, exhaling slowly as the flames flickered. He had no idea what he'd stepped into, but it wasn't a prison. It was a test, and strangely it felt like one he didn't want to run from, not yet. The next few days passed in a blur of cautious curiosity and awkward adaptation. John found himself adjusting to the rhythms of the mountain village, learning which paths were safe in the wind, which bridges groaned too loudly under pressure, and how to duck low-hanging lantern vines that dangled over steep stairwells. The fog never lifted fully. It crept between dwellings like a slow breath, carrying the scent of burning wood, damp moss, and something sharp and mineral, like ozone before a storm. Despite the isolation, the village was alive with movement. Beast folk sharpened weapons, tanned leather, gathered glowing herbs, and trained with long-handled blades in the stone courtyards. Occasionally, a pair of glowing eyes would linger on John longer than he liked. Most didn't speak to him, but a few offered nods or cautious stares. He could feel it constantly. He was being evaluated, measured, judged. He spent much of his time helping wherever he could, eager to prove he wasn't dead weight. Paisley seemed to understand that he needed a purpose and guided him toward practical tasks. She showed him an old corroded solar converter that had been scavenged from a derelict shuttle years ago, now used to power a portion of the village's fungal farms. With her help, he cracked open the housing, cleaned the crystal arrays, and rerouted the cabling to double the output. When he got the panels humming again, she simply nodded once, but her tail flicked in clear approval. That night, when the fungi glowed brighter and longer than anyone expected, even the elders took notice. It didn't erase the skepticism surrounding him, but it softened it. Still, not everyone was impressed. One evening, as John returned from a storage alcove with replacement gear parts, he heard the low snarl of an argument near the upper den paths. He recognized Paisley's voice, calm but stern, facing off against another voice that cut through the air like broken stone. He turned a corner and saw them, Paisley standing firm, arms crossed, and a beastman a head taller than her, fur darker and rougher, horns jagged rather than smooth. His name was Torx, and John had heard of him before, once a favored warrior among her people, now a shadow of missed expectations. Torx's eyes flicked to John as he approached, and a low growl rose in his throat. This one, Torx said, pointing a clawed finger, is not one of us. He walks too loud, smells too thin, and cannot fight. You disgrace our ways. He fixed the converter, Paisley replied without raising her voice. Something you didn't offer to do. He disrupts the bond of the clan, Torx snapped. You should have waited. We had a path, you and I. John stepped forward before he realized what he was doing. I'm not here to take anything from anyone. I didn't crash my ship for fun. I didn't ask to be chosen, and I didn't ask for this argument. Talk turned on him, teeth bared slightly, posture tense. Then leave before you make things worse. You don't know our ways. You don't belong. John met his glare without backing down. I don't belong yet, but I'm trying. That's more than some people would do. Paisley moved between them, her eyes cold. Enough, this ends here. The bond has been chosen, Torx. Your challenge is noted, your bitterness is not. Torx spat onto the stone floor, gave them both a glare filled with quiet loathing, and walked off into the fog. Silence followed. John stared at the spot where the beastman disappeared before speaking. He doesn't strike me as the forget and move on type. No, Paisley said softly. He won't, but his teeth are dulled by pride. He'll bark before he bites. Later that night, John sat by the inner fire pit of Paisley's den, running his fingers along a piece of metal scrap he'd pulled from the wreckage, one of the shuttle's old data cores. He wasn't sure if it still worked, but he was going to try. The air was heavy, not with smoke, but with the feeling of expectations. Paisley crouched nearby, skin gleaming in the firelight beneath her fur, horned silhouette relaxed but watchful. I don't think I realized just how close this place is to the edge, John said finally, breaking the quiet. What do you mean? Everyone's tense. They act like I'm some kind of fuse. I step wrong and the whole thing blows. You're not wrong, she replied. Our people are slow to change. Our traditions are woven into the cliffs. You're the first outsider we've allowed to live among us since the sky raids, and most of the clan fears you'll bring ruin. Do you believe that? She turned to face him fully. No, I believe you'll bring change. Whether ruin follows will depend on how strong your steps are. He chuckled dryly. I should have brought a manual on how to walk in someone else's life. Paisley smiled just slightly and reached over to place a hand on his. Her palm was rough, calloused from blade training, but warm. You're doing better than most would. For a moment, the fire was the only thing between them, flickering quietly, casting light that danced over the carvings in the stone walls. It wasn't romantic yet, not fully, but something was shifting. He could feel it, not forced, not primal, but mutual. Whatever bond she believed in by instinct, he was beginning to see through reason. She wasn't a captor, and this place wasn't a cage. She offered him a future, and now, for the first time in his adult life, he was beginning to wonder what that kind of permanence might feel like. A soft knock on the stone arch broke the silence. A young beastman entered, a messenger, his horns still small, his voice nervous. Stranger seen, North Ridge, metal skins. Paisley stood immediately, motioning for John to follow. Stay close, she said. If this is what I think it is, your past just found us. John's heart sank. Only one group called those armored scavengers metal skins, corporate recon units, the same kind who charted unclaimed resource zones and cleared obstacles without asking questions. If they were here, the village wasn't just facing cultural disruption. It was facing obliteration. He followed Paisley out into the fog again, heart pounding not for his own safety but for hers, for theirs, and for whatever fragile firelit thing was starting to grow between them. The mountain wind had shifted. John noticed it immediately, the way the breeze no longer carried the usual damp chill, but instead brought a strange, static weight with it, like the air knew something dangerous had crossed the threshold. He followed Paisley through narrow cliffside paths and across swaying bridges as beast folk sentinels lit warning lanterns and passed hushed signals from ridge to ridge. It was coordinated, efficient. The village had clearly faced threats before, but this time was different. This time it wasn't just a predator or a wandering beast. This time it was the shadow of John's past, wrapped in armor, protocol, and authorization codes from companies that saw planets as product lines and settlements as obstacles. They reached a narrow outpost built into a jagged spur of rock overlooking a distant slope. From there they could see the silhouettes moving through the mist. The recon team had come light, only 4 visible figures, each clad in metallic armor with glowing visors and modular backpacks that probably carried scanning drones. They moved in methodical steps, sweeping the area with sensors and long-range pulse rifles cradled casually, like they weren't expecting resistance. One of them stopped, knelt, and ran a scanner along a patch of moss that had likely been trodden by a beast folk scout earlier that morning. John squinted and his stomach tightened. He recognized the patch on that scout's shoulder, Unit G-17, Standard Corporate Recon Division. He knew what that meant. They weren't here to make first contact. They were here to mark the terrain, record data, and report anomalies to the acquisition board. And once those anomalies were deemed valuable or problematic, a cleanup team would follow. Paisley crouched beside him, hand resting on a nearby rock, her expression unreadable. "They come for the stone," she said. "The glint veins that run beneath our terraces. They think it's only ore." John nodded. "It's not just ore, is it?" She shook her head. "It fuels our lights, it strengthens our weapons, but it's more than that. It binds the cliff paths. Without it, the terraces collapse." "They won't care," he said quietly. "Once they realize it's valuable, they'll file the claim, send a transport, maybe even call in a clearance unit if they think there's a security concern. They'll strip the mountain, bury the village, and call it an environmental loss in the report." Paisley's eyes flicked to him. "How do you know this?" He didn't answer right away, watching the recon team continue their scan. He felt the weight of the past settle on his shoulders. "Because I used to fly for them, not recon, but cargo. I moved minerals, tech, even workers. I've seen what happens when they decide a place isn't profitable enough to preserve." Her expression didn't change, but her hand gripped the stone tighter. "Then you've brought them here." "I didn't send a beacon," he snapped, sharper than he meant to. "The crash did, the ship's emergency transponder. It could have pinged before the wreck. They probably tracked the signal and came to investigate. I didn't mean for this to happen." "I know," she said after a moment, voice low. "But knowing doesn't stop the storm." The recon team moved further downslope, disappearing into a grove of mist-shrouded fungal trees. John exhaled, his mind already racing. He knew their timeline. Recon wouldn't linger. They'd scan, tag, and transmit. If they didn't see immediate danger, they'd leave within a day, send in a follow-up team with heavier equipment. That gave them at best 48 hours before the real trouble began. Back at the village, a council meeting was called near the central fire pit. Elders, warriors, scouts, and clan representatives formed a circle as signals were relayed about the intruders. Paisley stood before them, explaining what she and John had seen. When she mentioned his name, dozens of eyes turned to him, some suspicious, others curious, a few burned with open resentment. He stepped forward anyway. "I know what's coming," he said. "They won't ask questions. They won't care how long you've lived here or what this mountain means to you. They'll scan, send data, and when it hits the board, this place becomes a target. You'll have maybe a week before equipment drops in and starts tearing through the cliffs." "And what would you have us do, human?" One of the elders growled, his voice thick with years and weight. "Flee, hide deeper in the stone." "No," John said. "Fight smart. You know this terrain better than anyone. You've got vantage points, narrow paths, weather. You've survived here because this place obeys you. Use that. Don't meet them head-on. Slow them down, confuse their sensors, reroute their signals. Make them think this place is cursed or unstable or not worth the effort. And most importantly, don't give them what they're looking for. If they think there's no ore, they'll move on." A low murmur rippled through the circle. One of the younger warriors stepped forward, a scar running across her muzzle. "He's right. We have old paths, ghost bridges, light benders. We can make them see what we want." Another spoke up. "But what of the scent bond? Will you protect her, outsider?" John didn't hesitate. "With my life." The words echoed louder than he expected, and the murmurs faded. Paisley turned slightly, one brow raised, but she said nothing. The decision was made. The village would not flee. They would prepare. That night, John walked alone down one of the outer bridges, watching the mist swirl below. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Paisley approaching, arms folded, expression thoughtful. "You spoke well," she said. "I wasn't trying to impress anyone." "You didn't. You spoke truth. That's rarer than you know." He leaned against the railing. "This place means something to me now, not just because it's beautiful, not just because it saved my life. You did, and I don't want to see it turned into slag and ashes." She stepped beside him, close but not touching. "Then we'll protect it together, bond or no bond." He glanced sideways. "You're giving me a way out." "I'm giving you a choice. One day you'll need to take it." He didn't answer, but he reached out slowly and took her hand. She didn't pull away. For a moment the wind quieted and the village below glowed like a fire beneath the stars. But in the distance, unseen in the dark fog, the recon team's signal pulsed again, stronger this time, reaching for the orbiting satellites that would carry their findings to the corporate boardroom waiting far, far away. The next day began with tension in the air so thick it clung to every breath. John moved quickly through the village, helping reinforce support beams on the older cliff paths and checking on the signal scramblers he'd helped the beast folk rig together from salvaged tech. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. The plan was to feed false readings into the satellites, make the mineral veins appear depleted, the terrain unstable, and the settlement uninhabitable. If the recon data made it seem like the site wasn't worth the effort, the corporation might simply redirect to a cleaner target. But all that relied on speed, precision, and luck, things that had a nasty habit of falling apart when it mattered most. As he made his way back toward the main den, a voice called out his name from the fog. A woman's voice, sharp and familiar. He froze. He hadn't heard that voice in over a year. "John, you better not still be flying junkers through dead zones." He turned slowly, disbelief tightening his chest. Standing near the edge of a fungal-lit path was a figure in a corporate recon jacket, her helmet tucked under one arm, dark hair tied back, and a half-smirk on her face. Olivia, his ex, and now apparently one of the recon leads assigned to this site. She looked older, harder around the edges, but just as confident and sharp as he remembered. He didn't move. "What are you doing here?" She raised an eyebrow. "Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing. You crash your ship again? You always had a thing for bad landings." John didn't answer. His mind was already calculating possibilities. If she was here, that meant they'd confirmed the transponder signal, tracked it, and were likely already transmitting their findings to HQ. If she saw the village, really saw it, everything they were doing to mask it would fall apart. "I'm not here for small talk, Olivia." "No, I thought maybe you wanted to explain how your crash transponder put this place on our radar. My team found the burn marks a few clicks down the ridge." She stepped closer, scanning the fog. "I know you're hiding something. You were always a terrible liar." John stood his ground. "There's nothing here for you, just cliffs and empty caves." "Uh-huh," she crossed her arms. "Look, I don't have time for a mystery tour. Just tell me what you're protecting and maybe I can cut you a deal." "There's no deal," he said. "You go back, tell them it was a false lead, and they'll move on." Olivia narrowed her eyes. "Why are you so eager to send us away?" Before he could answer, a low growl echoed through the fog. Paisley stepped forward from the mist, blade resting casually across her shoulder. She didn't look angry, just ready, her glowing yellow eyes locked onto Olivia, reading everything in a glance. "Who's this?" Olivia asked, her posture stiffening as she took in the beast woman's horns and height. "This is Paisley," John said evenly. "She saved my life, and she's the reason I'm still standing here." Paisley didn't speak to Olivia directly. Her gaze stayed focused, but her presence spoke volumes. There was no threat in her stance, but there was no softness either. Olivia glanced between them, her expression shifting to something more calculating. "You're serious. You're living with them." "I'm not just living," he replied. "I'm part of this now." She scoffed. "You've lost your damn mind. Do you even understand what you're doing? These creatures don't." "Don't finish that sentence," John cut in, voice flat. Olivia stepped back, eyes narrowing. "You've bonded with one of them. Are you even listening to yourself?" "I've seen more humanity in this village than I ever saw in corporate outposts," John said. "They have structure, history, community. You bulldoze this place, you're not just mining rocks. You're erasing a people." "This isn't up to me," Olivia snapped. "If the scans are positive, the site's greenlit, you can't stop it." "No," John admitted, "but I can delay it." She frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It meant she'd seen enough to be a problem, and he had to act fast before she reported in. But before he could speak, Paisley shifted closer, eyes still locked on Olivia. "You should leave," she said simply. "This place will not welcome you." "I don't take orders from—" "I wasn't giving one," Paisley said. "I was making a promise." Something about the way she said it made Olivia falter just for a second. She looked at John, then back to Paisley, then exhaled. "You've got 24 hours. After that, the survey date is finalized. HQ will get it whether I'm here or not." With that, she turned and disappeared into the fog again. John watched her go, heart-pounding, mind racing. 24 hours. That was all they had left. Back in the den, he sat beside Paisley, neither of them speaking for a while. The fire burned low, casting long shadows across the stone walls. "You knew her?" Paisley finally said. "Used to," John replied. "She was complicated, she still is. They'll come back, and next time they won't just be scouting." He nodded slowly. "We've got one day to make this village invisible." Paisley leaned forward. "We don't run, that's not our way." "I'm not asking you to run. I'm asking you to hide just long enough for the satellite to look the other way." She studied him, then rose. Then we'll hide, but if they return in force, we fight. He stood, meeting her eyes. If they return in force, we do both. She smiled, but it was a sad smile. You sound like one of us now. Maybe he was, maybe he always had been in some strange, inexplicable way. As he watched her prepare for what came next, gathering elders, instructing scouts, sharpening the old ceremonial blades, he realized something he hadn't allowed himself to believe before. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was home, and he'd fight for it even if it meant standing against the very sky he'd once flown through. The night came thick with fog and tension. Lanterns hung low and dim, casting soft orange glows over the stone paths and hollow dens of the cliffside village. The wind had died down, a rare stillness that made the silence more ominous. Everyone moved with purpose now, quick but quiet, voices kept low, eyes constantly sweeping the edges of the fog. John could feel the countdown in every glance exchanged between villagers, in every moment of hesitation before a tool was passed or a knot tied. The recon team was still out there somewhere, likely transmitting data back to orbit, and the second those reports finalized, the window would slam shut. They needed to vanish before that happened. He worked beside Paisley through most of the evening, helping her and a trio of beast folk hunters install pulse dampeners along the eastern ridge. The devices were crude, modified from scavenged comm equipment, but with enough of them placed across the terraces, the idea was to scatter any returning scans, creating the illusion of landslides, mineral depletion, and tectonic instability. It wasn't a perfect trick, but corporate boards rarely double-checked sites marked as low risk and resource deficient. He just needed the illusion to hold long enough to buy time. Time for the recon team to leave. Time for satellites to flag the zone as unreliable. Time for everyone here to keep breathing. Paisley didn't speak much as they worked, but when she did, her words carried the weight of someone preparing for more than just misdirection. Torx has been watching the upper spire, she said, hammering a sensor node into place against the stone. He doesn't believe this will be enough. He wants a show of strength. John grunted as he adjusted the dampener's frequency. Of course he does. Torx wants a reason to fight, and if he gets one, the company will just file a security alert and escalate everything. He says your ways are weak. John smirked faintly. Then he's not paying attention. I'm not doing this because I can't fight. I'm doing this because I want us to win without losing everything. Paisley looked at him for a moment, eyes unreadable in the fungal glow. You sound like a clan leader. I'm not. I'm just the guy who fell out of the sky and accidentally bonded with the fiercest woman on the mountain. Her mouth twitched slightly, almost a smile. Accident or not, the bond is real, and it's growing. They finished the last dampener and headed back across the terrace. The walk was quiet, the kind of silence that came only when both people were thinking too many things at once. John knew she was weighing more than just strategy. She was thinking about what might happen if this didn't work, if the corporate machines came down from orbit with drills and guns and authority. She was thinking about Torx and the others who still doubted him. And maybe she was thinking about him in a different way now. No longer an outsider, but a man standing firmly inside her world. As they crossed one of the upper bridges, a loud crunch echoed through the fog. Stone shattered nearby, followed by the sharp whine of an energy tool. John grabbed Paisley's arm and ducked behind a rocky outcrop, just in time to see a familiar glow cut through the mist. Olivia was back, alone or at least pretending to be, and she was standing in front of one of the sensor posts. She didn't look surprised to see it. She'd been looking for it. John cursed under his breath. She's verifying the anomalies. If she confirms they're not natural, she'll override the report. We stop her, Paisley said simply. No, John said quickly. We distract her. I need to talk to her. Before Paisley could argue, he stepped out of cover, raising both hands. Olivia. She turned, pulse pistol already raised, but lowered it slightly when she saw it was him. You really don't know when to quit, do you? You're making a mistake. She glanced past him. You think I don't know what this is? You're using signal distortion and topographical cloaking, old tricks. But that doesn't change the fact that there are energy readings coming from this ridge that match Glintstone's signatures. It's not what you think. You mine this place, you collapse half the mountain. You'll destroy their homes. Hell, you might trigger a chain reaction that kills your whole team. She frowned, scanning his face. What is it with you? You fall into some backwater mountain cult and suddenly you're a crusader. John stepped closer. They're not a cult. They're a civilization with laws, history, memory. You dig here and it's not just theft, it's genocide. That's not your call to make. You're right, he said. It's yours, but it doesn't have to be this way. You can flag the data as inconclusive, say the area is unstable, push it down the priority list. She stared at him, struggling with something behind her eyes. Do you love her? The question hit him harder than he expected. He didn't flinch. Yes. She exhaled, something in her face tightening. Then I hope she's worth your career. I already gave that up. Olivia stepped back and looked at the dampener post again, then at the readings on her wrist pad. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she keyed something into her interface, and the scanner light dimmed. Data corrupted, she said aloud, as if reporting to someone unseen. Possible environmental interference. Recommend delaying extraction schedule for reevaluation. John blinked. I didn't do it for you, she said. I did it because I don't want to be responsible for another burned world. She turned without another word and vanished into the fog again. John stood there, stunned, until Paisley came to his side. She left. He nodded. We bought time. That's all we ever have, Paisley said and reached for his hand. But sometimes it's enough. Together they returned to the village, where the wind began to pick up again, sweeping the fog higher into the night sky. The scanners were quiet, the signals dulled, and for the first time in days, John let himself hope. They'd held the mountain, for now. And in the quiet between dangers, something strong was taking root, not just survival, not just alliance, but something far deeper, binding two lives with more than instinct, something that neither time nor war could undo. The wind changed again 2 days later, carrying with it the bitter sting of fire and something else, metal, scorched, and unnatural. John stood near the southern ridge, staring into the valley where ash floated like ghost snow in the morning light. The cliff village had held for now. Olivia's falsified report had delayed the corporation's mobilization, and for a brief stretch of hours, it had felt like they might have slipped free of the noose. But good things never held long when it came to the greed of off-world powers. A mining drone had returned that morning on an autonomous path, its AI bypassing Olivia's data with hard-coded parameters. When it scanned too close to the village's energy fields, the sentinels brought it down. They had no choice. The thing was armed and curious. And now it was scrap metal, cooling on the mountain floor. The problem wasn't the drone. It was the data package it had beamed back before crashing. Paisley stood beside John, silent and still as a carved statue, eyes locked on the thin plume of smoke in the distance. They will come again, she said. They already are, John replied. That transmission went through. I saw the signal burst. This time they'll send more than recon. And what will you do when they arrive? She asked, turning to face him. He hesitated. Fight if I have to, but I want to stop them before it gets that far. Paisley studied him. There are paths, forgotten ones, tunnels carved before even our ancestors were born. If they are still passable, we can use them to evacuate, to strike first. John didn't like the sound of that. He'd grown to admire the quiet strength of the beast folk, the way they clung to their mountain not just with blades, but with memory and craft. But there was a part of him that feared what they might become if war pushed too hard on their borders. Still, he followed Paisley as she led him down a narrow set of stairs etched into the side of a sheer wall. They descended for nearly an hour before reaching a half-buried arch, choked with vines and lichen. She touched the carvings beside it, ancient sigils glowing faintly under her hand, and the stones groaned as they shifted open. Inside was darkness, not the kind that comes from lack of light, but the kind that feels older than time. The tunnel walls were black rock, damp and veined with glowing fungus, and the air was heavy with the scent of old dust and forgotten things. They walked in silence, the path winding deeper into the mountain, until it opened into a vast hollow chamber, easily the size of a starship hangar. In the center stood something he hadn't expected, an ancient forge long dormant, surrounded by weapons and armor that shimmered with a dull, eerie sheen.